My name is Isla Carter, 45 years old, wife of Thomas Carter, the man the whole city calls the real estate king. That night, I walked into a luxurious hotel, thinking I was attending a charity gala to raise funds for underprivileged children. But the moment I stepped past the lobby, I heard a woman's soft laugh behind me. Tonight is Thomas's farewell party to his old wife, before he leaves for Italy with the new one. My heart stopped. The warm golden lights, the gentle music, suddenly felt foreign. And there, in the middle of the dance floor, Thomas was holding a young woman close, looking at her the way he used to look at me 20 years ago. If it were you, what would you do when you found out your husband's charity gala was really his goodbye? Leave a comment and tell me what you think. Hit like and subscribe to hear the next part, where everything turns faster than you could imagine. I forced myself to keep a calm pace as I stepped out of the glittering ballroom. But in my mind, memories from long ago began rushing back like a film playing in reverse. 20 years ago, I was an ordinary real estate agent in a small coastal town on the East Coast. Back then, Thomas Carter wasn't a name everyone knew. He was a young salesman with eyes that held something both reckless and naive, a belief that he would one day build his own real estate empire. We met at a small housing investment seminar, when he was presenting a bold idea about transforming abandoned housing blocks into luxury residential neighborhoods. After his presentation, Thomas walked over to me with a cup of coffee in hand. "You work in real estate?" "I'm Thomas. I think you might be interested in a project I've been working on." I laughed. "You think I'll trust a stranger just because he talks about a big project, when I don't even know where you came from?" Thomas didn't flinch. He leaned slightly toward me, his voice lower. "Because I believe one day my name will be on the biggest sign in this city. And I need someone who believes that with me." Maybe it was that audacity that pulled me into his orbit. We dated only a few months before I realized I wanted to bet on him, not only with my heart but with everything I had. When my father passed away, I inherited $1.8 million. Instead of keeping it in the bank, I used every cent to help Thomas open his first company. I called every contact my family had, investors, my father's old friends, my longtime clients, to introduce Thomas. Every one of his first contracts came from meetings I arranged. We spent countless nights at our tiny kitchen table, me reviewing contracts while Thomas sketched project layouts on scrap paper. The early years were brutal. We had to borrow more, and I even mortgaged the small house my parents had left me to keep the business afloat. But every time we came close to bankruptcy, Thomas landed another deal. When the company finally became profitable, we bought our dream home in the suburbs and our 2 children were born. Emily, then Jack. I always told myself every sacrifice was worth it. I wasn't just his wife, I was his partner in every major decision. But as the company expanded out of state, small changes crept in. At first, it was unexpected business trips, meetings I was no longer invited to. I still remember the first night Thomas came home late without telling me. I was sitting in the living room with the lamp still on when I heard his car in the garage. He walked in with a tired smile and a faint trace of unfamiliar perfume. "I thought you said the meeting was at the office?" I asked. "Oh, right, but then everyone decided to go out for dinner. You know how it is, got to maintain relationships." Then came the phone calls that ended the moment I entered the room. When I asked, Thomas only smiled. "Difficult clients, you don't want to hear this." I told myself not to be paranoid. He was my husband, the man who had once held my hand through the lean years. Surely he couldn't betray me. But the distance between us kept growing. Family dinners were replaced by client parties, and even when he was home, Thomas was buried in his phone or emails. Emily started asking, "Is Dad coming home for dinner, Mom?" And I would answer with a forced smile, "Dad's busy, honey." Once I suggested I join him on a trip to New York to meet a new partner, but Thomas refused outright. "No need, Isla. This is my work." That sentence made me feel like I was no longer part of what we once called us. I wasn't blind to the red flags, but I clung to the image of the young man who once held my hand in the rain and promised never to let me go. I thought if I kept supporting him, we would find our way back. But tonight, under the dazzling hotel lights, the soft music, and the poisonous whispers, I finally saw the truth. The distance between me and Thomas wasn't about work. He had left me long ago. And it all began with the signs I once chose to ignore. The lights in the gala hall shimmered so brightly I had to squint as I stepped deeper into the crowd. Round tables draped in white linen, crystal glasses neatly arranged, conversations and laughter mingling with soft jazz. It was the perfect atmosphere for an elegant evening, if I hadn't heard that gut punch of a comment minutes earlier as I walked in. Among the shifting figures I spotted Thomas. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, hair neatly combed and that familiar confident smile. But what stopped me in my tracks wasn't his presence. It was the way his arm rested around the waist of a young woman. She was tall and slender, with golden hair in soft waves, wearing a silver satin dress that hugged her figure. When she tilted her head and smiled at the guests, I heard the host announce, "Please welcome Lila Monroe, the brand ambassador for Carter Group's charity project." Lila Monroe. The name meant nothing to me, but the way Thomas's hand sat on her waist was far too familiar. I forced a smile, moving toward the buffet table to pour myself a glass of wine, hoping for a few seconds to steady myself. Before I could take a sip, I felt a light touch on my arm. Isla. The familiar whisper of Mark Jensen, the company's longtime CFO. He leaned in so no one else could hear. "Do you know he sold 15% of the company shares in your name last week?" I turned, keeping my expression neutral. "What did you say?" Mark swallowed, his eyes showing a flicker of unease. "The contract's already signed." "I thought you had agreed." I smiled as if it were nothing important to put him at ease, then turned away. In my mind, the pieces began snapping into place. Why had Thomas claimed to be on a business trip to Chicago last week? Why had he avoided every financial conversation with me? And why, tonight in this crowd, was he standing beside a young, beautiful woman instead of his wife? A burst of laughter rang out from the stage. I looked up. Lila was stepping forward, holding a velvet-covered box. The host announced it as a token of gratitude for the year's most generous donor. Thomas walked up slowly, his eyes gleaming with a self-satisfaction I had never seen so clearly before. When he took the box from Lila's hands, they exchanged a look as if sharing a secret no one else in the ballroom could understand. I kept my face composed, but the tightening of my grip on the wineglass betrayed me. The faint clink of glass sounded as I set it down on the nearest table. Then Thomas turned toward the microphone, his voice echoing through the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is not only an occasion for us to join forces for a noble cause, but also the beginning of a new journey." I heard every word as if he were speaking directly to me. Carter Group will expand into the international market. And to lead this project, I will be moving to Italy in the next few months. A round of applause erupted. My breath caught, my body refusing to move. Not a single mention of me, the one who had built everything with him from nothing. Not a single glance toward the corner of the room where I stood. Only smiles, congratulatory handshakes, and Lila right beside him, her face glowing as if this were a shared victory. Mark's eyes flicked toward me, apologetic. I gave a small nod, signaling I was fine, though my throat tightened. A server passed by, a tray of glistening wine glasses under the lights. I took a fresh glass but didn't drink. I needed a clear head. Because in that moment, amid the applause and music, I knew this wasn't an international project. This was Thomas's coded announcement that he was preparing to leave me, and he wanted to do it in front of the whole city. I drew a deep breath, fixing my gaze on the stage. Lila leaned in, whispering something into Thomas's ear that made him laugh. The crowd didn't notice, but I saw it clearly. And I also felt for the first time in years that my heart wasn't racing from heartbreak, but from something else, an icy clarity. I knew this moment would be the start of an entirely different story. And it would not be the one Thomas or Lila had in mind. I stepped into the marble-tiled restroom, where the warm yellow lighting over the large mirrors made everything look softer than it really was. The sounds of the party outside were shut out by the closed door, leaving only the sound of water running from a faucet somewhere. I wanted a quiet corner to breathe, but then a familiar voice from the far end of the room stopped me in my tracks. "She's going to cry when she finds out the Hamptons estate is already in my name." Lila's voice, soft like she was sharing a delicious secret with her friend. I couldn't see them directly, but through the mirror's reflection in the corner, I caught Lila's silhouette next to another young woman, her fingers playing with an expensive necklace, her lips curling in smug triumph. Her words were a cold blade straight to my chest. The Hamptons estate. The place where I had chosen every patio tile, every wicker chair for the balcony. It had once been where the whole family gathered every summer, where my children learned to swim in the pool out back. My legs felt numb, but I forced myself to stand tall. Without revealing I'd heard everything, I walked to another sink. Cold water spilled over my trembling fingers, but in my mind, a fire was already burning. When I left the restroom, I pulled out my phone. My fingers moved by habit, but the screen flashed an incorrect password notification. I tried again. Wrong. Once more. Still wrong. Thomas had changed the password to our joint bank account. The hallway seemed to close in as I gripped the phone, forcing down the sting as if a hand had struck my face. The party lights spilled through the door cracks, the chatter and laughter still loud. I took a long breath and pushed the door open. Thomas was near the main table holding a glass of red wine, chatting with a few familiar guests. When he saw me approach, he frowned slightly, then leaned toward me, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "The lawyer will contact you tomorrow. I want a divorce within 30 days. In that moment, all the sounds around me faded away. The face of the man I had once loved more than myself now felt so foreign it sent a chill down my spine. I didn't ask why. I gave a slight nod, then turned and walked away. The sound of my heels striking the hardwood floor rang out, steady, cutting through the music and voices. I passed by faces that had smiled at me at countless parties, the mutual friends who once toasted to our marriage. Tonight, no one called my name, no one stepped forward to stop me. At the door, I glanced back. Thomas was still in the same spot, continuing his conversation with the group as if our exchange had never happened. Lila was leaning in, saying something that made the whole table laugh. No one noticed, or perhaps no one cared, that I was leaving that room not only with empty hands, but with a deep, unhealed wound in my chest. Outside the hotel, the cool night air slipped through the thin fabric of my gown, making me shiver. The steps held me still as I watched the river of traffic flow beyond. It felt like I had walked out of a world I had spent half my life building, but no longer had a place in. The doorman looked at me, a little unsure whether to ask if I was all right or simply open the door. I gave a polite smile and nodded in thanks. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I heard the hotel door close behind me, cutting off the sounds from inside completely. I walked to the parking lot, each step pulling along a string of memories. Nights Thomas and I sketched out our future, the business trips I arranged so we could work and still have time together, even the times he held me and said, "We're a team." Now that team had been erased in one short sentence. I opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat. I didn't start the engine right away, resting my head on the steering wheel and closing my eyes. The emptiness seeped through me, but beneath it something else was forming, a cold, steady resolve. I knew that when one door closes, another often opens. But this time the new door wouldn't open on its own. I would have to push it with my own hands. I got home close to midnight. The dim yellow light from the living room lamp fell over the family photos on the wall, once a source of pride, now relics of a life I no longer belonged to. I hung my evening coat over a chair and walked straight into the study. I'd kept the room exactly as my father had left it. Oak filing cabinets, a sturdy old desk, and a dark brown swivel chair. I opened a drawer, picked up the landline, and dialed a number. "Ethan, it's Isla. I know it's late, but I need you right now." His voice was deep and rough, but still alert. "What's going on?" "I need you to run a full search on all assets under my name and Thomas's. Immediately." Only minutes after I hung up, Ethan had already sent a preliminary report to my email. I opened it, my eyes scanning line by line. I used to hold 27% of the company. He had moved 15, 12 remained in my name, along with ownership of a large charitable foundation he hadn't touched. I sat still for a moment, then opened the filing cabinet. My fingers slid over each folder, each faded label. I pulled out a thick stack. Investment contracts from the company's early days, transfer receipts, internal emails I had saved out of habit. When I reached the folder marking our 12th year of marriage, I found an old yellow envelope. Inside was a contract titled Permanent Authorization, signed 8 years ago. In bold letters, granting full authority to Isla Carter to approve any expenditure over $500,000. I remembered the day we signed it, Thomas laughing, "I trust you completely. I don't want to have to run home every time I need a signature." I believed him, never imagining that one day this authority would become my only weapon. I opened my laptop and created a new folder titled Project Heart, after my father's last name. One by one, I scanned and saved documents. Company papers, wire transfer receipts, emails related to major projects. Each click of the scanner was another puzzle piece falling into place in my mind. Around 1 a.m. Ethan called back. Isla, I dug deeper. Besides the shares and the foundation, you also own several properties Thomas thinks were already transferred to the company. Legally, they're still yours. I leaned back in my chair, feeling for the first time in weeks like I had solid ground beneath me. Good. Freeze all transactions involving those assets. And Ethan, no one, not even Thomas, can know I asked for this. I hung up, then turned back to the stack of files. The more I read, the more I saw how Thomas had skillfully edged me out of the company over the years. But he had underestimated my memory and meticulousness. Every contract I'd stayed up late reviewing, every call I'd made to explain things to partners on his behalf. Those details would now be proof that I wasn't merely Thomas Carter's wife. I was the co-founder, the biggest early investor. When dawn began to break, I closed the last file. On the desk in front of me sat 3 piles of documents. One for shares, one for real estate, and one for investments through the foundation. Each bore my signature or direct proof of my involvement. Rising from my chair, I pulled the curtains open. Morning light flooded in, spilling over the black and white pages. And I realized this was the starting point of a counterattack Thomas would never see coming. A week later, while I was in my office organizing files, the phone rang. Thomas's name flashed on the screen. I hesitated for a moment but still picked up. His voice was much softer than it had been the night of the gala. Isla, I think we should talk. Civilly. No need to turn this into a scandal. You know the media is paying attention. I leaned back in my chair, letting him finish. Then I simply replied, fine. But I'll choose the place. Not even an hour later, my mother-in-law called. Her voice tried to sound concerned, but underneath was the familiar layer of pressure. Sweetheart, don't blow this up. It will hurt the company, the family. Thomas is still the father of your children. I know he's at fault, but we can find a way to settle this within the family. I smiled but kept my tone steady. I also want to settle it within the family, Mother. And I've already made arrangements. 3 days later, Thomas walked into my attorney's office, still looking as put together as always, though his eyes held a trace of tension. He didn't know Ethan, my father's financial advisor, and my attorney, Maya Reynolds, were already seated inside. We need privacy, Isla. Thomas glanced quickly toward them. This is the civil conversation you suggested. And they're witnesses. I placed a thick folder in front of him, sliding it toward him. He frowned. What's this? I flipped it open, pulling out a series of printed emails, each page numbered at the top right. Black and white with clear dates and times, the subject lines blunt. Charity Fund, Rome Project. I'm sure you remember these passages, Thomas. I turned to the first page, reading aloud. If we use the foundation account to pay the construction company, the apartment purchase will be legitimate on paper. The remainder will go directly to Elm. I looked up. Elm is Lila Monroe, isn't it? Thomas shifted in his seat, forcing a faint, mocking smile. You're taking that out of context. I slid another page toward him. And this one? Make sure Isla doesn't see this quarter's report. She still has authority over large expenditures. If we can get it past her, we'll finish before August. I tapped the bold printed sender's name, Thomas Carter. Silence settled for a few seconds. The only sound was Ethan's pen tapping against his notepad. Maya sat upright, her eyes locked on Thomas. I leaned forward, my voice low but each word clear. You know, if these documents end up in the press, or worse, in the hands of investigators, your international project will be over before it starts. And that's not even touching on the fact you used a tax-exempt charitable foundation to launder money. Thomas gave a short, dry laugh, but his eyes betrayed unease. What do you want? I folded my arms. First, I want you to understand this civil conversation isn't for me to hear your persuasion. It's for you to hear me. You think I'll stay silent while you and Lila use the money I built to buy an apartment in Rome? Did you forget about the permanent authorization contract from 8 years ago? Ethan cut in, his tone calm but firm. I've temporarily frozen all expenditures over $500,000 from the company under Isla's authority. Not a cent leaves without her signature. Thomas turned to me, his eyes flashing with irritation. You're shooting yourself in the foot. This company is yours too. No, Thomas. I met his gaze. This company was ours. But you chose to cut me out. Now I'm simply reclaiming what's mine. Maya placed another brown envelope on the table. This is a copy of the Hamptons property contract. Isla still has the legal right to contest the transfer. And we will, if necessary. Thomas leaned back in his chair, rubbing his forehead. I knew he was calculating, just like all the other times he'd had to wriggle out of a tight spot. But this time was different. He had no upper hand. We've had our civil conversation. Now the rest is up to you. Either cooperate or wait for the subpoena. As I reached the door, I heard Thomas call after me, but I didn't turn around. I knew that the moment he saw those emails, every card in his hand had started to fall. The press conference hall that morning was bright with camera flashes. The Carter Group logo and the words, Italy Project, a global step forward, were printed large on the backdrop behind the podium. The rows below were packed with reporters, sponsors, and VIP guests. I entered through a side door unnoticed, until I walked straight to the front row. At the podium, Thomas wore an immaculately cut deep blue suit and a professional smile. Lila sat in the VIP section, her bright red dress blazing against the crowd, her confident eyes fixed on the cameras. The moderator had finished the opening remarks when a male reporter stood up. Mr. Carter, there are rumors that the company's charitable foundation is being used for expenses unrelated to humanitarian work. Can you comment? The room's atmosphere dipped slightly. Thomas chuckled, his tone reassuring. Absolutely not. Carter Group has always maintained transparency in every transaction. I stood, cutting in. Excuse me, but I think this question deserves a different answer. All eyes turned to me. A few reporters recognized me, whispering to one another. I walked up to the podium, handing a small USB to the technician controlling the LED screen behind us. I'm Isla Carter, co-founder of Carter Group and co-signer of the Charitable Foundation's operating license. Today, I'm here with documents the public deserves to see. The first email appeared on the screen. My voice carried clearly through the microphone. This is correspondence between Thomas Carter and Lila Monroe, discussing how to use the foundation to pay for a fake construction contract in Rome, thereby purchasing a personal apartment. The screen switched to an image of the Hamptons property transfer, once in my name, signed over to Lila just weeks before the gala. Some in the room began murmuring. Then a video appeared, verified footage obtained by my attorney from an anonymous bank employee, showing Thomas and Lila in an Italian bank's transaction room, signing a stack of papers, the banker handing them a set of keys. Thomas's voice in clear English. Finally, we've wrapped this up. Cameras clicked furiously. A few major donors in the front row immediately bent down to make calls. I saw one representative from the main funding partner leave the room, his face like stone. Thomas struggled to keep his composure, his hand tightening around the microphone. Isla, you're destroying the whole company. You. No, Thomas. I looked straight at him. You did that yourself. I'm bringing the truth into the light. Within 10 minutes of the documents appearing, the phones of board members were ringing non-stop. I stepped down from the podium and returned to my seat while Thomas fumbled through the press's rapid-fire questions. Ethan, seated in the back row, gave me a small nod. Maya, standing along the side wall, was jotting down every reaction from the media. An hour later, as the chaotic press conference wrapped up, the board convened an emergency meeting. I didn't attend, but word spread quickly. Donors were pulling out, the company's stock price dropped more than 20% within 2 hours of trading, and outside pressure forced the board to demand Thomas temporarily step down pending an internal investigation. I walked out of the downtown building, the afternoon breeze cool against my hair. The city noise felt like a distant song. I knew the battle wasn't over, but today at least the scales had tipped in my favor. The cafe sat on a quiet street, its large glass windows spilling late afternoon sunlight across dark wooden tables. I arrived earlier than the set time, choosing a corner table with my back to the window to avoid prying eyes. The smell of roasted coffee rose warmly in the air, though it couldn't chase away the chill inside me. Thomas arrived right on time, looking thinner than the last time we met. The gray suit he wore seemed a little loose, his tie loosely knotted. When our eyes met, he gave a faint, half-hearted smile tinged with awkwardness. Isla, He pulled out a chair and sat, his hands clasped together on the table. I want to talk. The server brought 2 cups of espresso, but I only gave a small nod in thanks, my eyes never leaving Thomas. About the Hamptons, he began. I'll give it back to you. The paperwork, the ownership, everything will be restored as before. I know I was wrong to do that. I leaned an arm on the table, my voice low and clear. Thomas, you didn't invite me here to negotiate over a house. You invited me here to save yourself from the hole you dug. He swallowed hard, looking down at the steaming cup of coffee. I want you to hear me out. Not everything is as you think. Here's the thing, I cut in. The only chance you have is to sign the divorce settlement and forfeit all claims to our assets. I won't bring anything else to light if you do it now. Thomas looked up, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. You really want to erase 20 years of us? I'm not erasing anything, Thomas. You did that, piece by piece over the years. He stayed motionless for a moment before leaning back with a slow sigh. What if I don't sign? I lifted my purse onto the table, unzipped it, and pulled out a thick envelope. In here are copies of contracts, emails, and bank transaction records. I have enough to make investigators look not only into the Italy project but also into the charitable foundation you set up 10 years ago. If you want to keep going, I'll send them out tomorrow. His hand trembled slightly when I placed another stack of papers in front of him. The divorce agreement Maya had prepared. Sign here and here. I pointed to the 2 blank spaces. You give up all claims to our assets, including company shares, real estate, and joint investments. In return, I'll stay out of whatever explaining you have to do to the board or the court. He picked up the pen, twirling it between his fingers. I remembered how he used to sign million-dollar contracts without blinking, and now a single signature made him hesitate. Finally, Thomas took a deep breath, set the pen to paper, and signed his name, a little uneven. He pushed the papers back to me without a word. I slipped the agreement into my bag and stood. Thank you. I think that's enough for today. He looked up, his eyes slightly red but his voice still trying to remain steady. Isla, no matter what, I raised a hand gently to stop him. Don't say things you can't keep. I turned and walked out, the glass door giving a soft sound as I pushed it open. The afternoon sun spilled across the street, its glare making me squint. In my bag, the divorce settlement felt heavy, but it brought a lightness I hadn't felt in years. Through the glass behind me, Thomas still sat there, both hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. I knew that the moment the pen touched paper, our story had turned to a completely different page. I never thought I'd return to Maine, where the winters were long and the ocean stretched endlessly before my eyes. But when I stepped onto the coastal road, the salty wind rushing against my face, I knew I'd made the right choice. The house I bought was a small white cottage with weathered blue shingles from the sea air. From the living room window, I could see the old lighthouse still flashing every night. I spent the first few weeks fixing up every corner. The living room became a small gallery, displaying photographs I had taken when I was young, mixed with new ones I'd shot more recently. The back room, where the morning light poured in, became a photography studio, not to make a living immediately but so I could do something I loved every day. Part of the money from the asset division went into restructuring the old charitable foundation, renaming it the Carter Hope Foundation. This time it wasn't a front for shady deals. It was truly for supporting women starting over after divorce or escaping toxic relationships. My advisory team and I carefully selected which projects to fund, from a single mother's small bakery to an app connecting women in rural areas with job opportunities. The foundation's opening day found me on a simple stage in my backyard. The sea breeze whipped my hair as I spoke to more than 30 women sitting on wooden chairs. I know what it feels like to stand at a crossroads, unsure where you're headed. But I also know what it feels like to find yourself again, and it's worth taking that next step. Emily was the first to step up and hug me. Now 20 years old and in her final year studying graphic design, she whispered, "You did it, Mom." Jack, my 18-year-old son, stood beside her with a smile I hadn't seen often since everything with Thomas happened. He didn't say anything, squeezed my shoulder tightly. Since the divorce, they'd gradually moved in with me full-time. At first they said it was temporary, but warm dinners and waffle breakfasts on the porch seemed to have answered for them. My new life was simple but full of color. In the mornings I woke early, drinking coffee by the window overlooking the ocean. A few clients had already booked family portraits or personal shoots at my studio. Some came through friends' recommendations, others passed by and saw the wooden sign reading Heart Photography hanging outside. On quiet afternoons, I planned activities for the Carter Hope Foundation. We held workshops on financial management, business skills, and even group therapy sessions where women shared their stories. I saw the light in their eyes, the same light I had lost in myself years ago. One day, while I was adjusting my camera in the studio, Emily walked in with a box of pastries. I stopped by Linda's bakery, the one your foundation funded. She sent you some muffins as a thank you. I laughed, opening the box, the scent of cinnamon and apples filling the room. See? I'm not only taking pictures, I'm rebuilding a community. In the evenings when the ocean winds blew hard, we sat in the living room under blankets, flipping through old photo albums. Jack would sometimes burst out laughing at pictures of his younger self, hair wild, running along the sand. Emily snapped a few shots on her phone to send to friends. Even though I'd stepped into a new chapter, old memories still washed over me at times, like an unexpected wave. But instead of hurting, they reminded me how far I'd come. And each time I opened the window, looking out at the wide ocean and filling my lungs with that salty air, I felt as light as a bird in flight. I understood that recovery doesn't happen overnight. But each day, each new project, each smile from my children, each photograph I took was a piece helping me rebuild my own picture. And this time, that picture would have no place for betrayal or darkness. The gallery was bathed in warm golden light, reflecting off the black and white frames hanging along the walls. Each photo told a story, the resolute eyes of a woman who left a 30-year marriage to start growing flowers, the relieved smile of a single mother who found her voice again after years of silence. The murmur of conversations blended with the sound of footsteps on the wooden floor, creating an oddly comforting rhythm. I was standing next to one of my favorite pieces, a portrait of a silver-haired woman in an old wool coat, her eyes bright as dawn, when a stranger approached. He wore a long brown coat, his face serious, and spoke only one short sentence. "This is for you." He placed a thick envelope in my hand and walked out the door, disappearing into the crowd outside before I could ask anything. I hesitated for a moment, then opened it. Inside was a color photograph of Lila Monroe leaving a courthouse in Rome. She was wearing the same designer coat she'd once flaunted, but her face was pale, her eyes vacant, and around her swarmed paparazzi with their cameras aimed at her. In the photo, her high heel seemed caught on the edge of the curb, giving her a stumbling gait that stripped away all her confidence. Motionless, I let my fingertip travel the photo's edge. So many questions could be asked. Why she was in court, who took the photo, why it was sent to me. But I didn't ask. Part of me already knew the answers wouldn't change anything. I smiled faintly, folded the photo and slipped it into my bag. Not because I wanted to keep it as a trophy, but because it reminded me that time and truth have their own way of resolving things. Some endings don't need my hand, they happen in their own way at the right time. I love this one. It's truly inspiring. A female voice pulled me back into the room. A young woman, around 30, was standing before her own portrait in the exhibition. She wore a simple blue dress, her hair neatly tied back, but her eyes shone. Back then I was so hesitant, but thanks to the shoot with you, I found the courage to sign my resignation and start the job I really love. I smiled, resting a hand gently on her shoulder. Sometimes, all we need is one photograph to remind ourselves that we're still here. All around, guests moved slowly, lingering longer in front of each photo, as if searching for a piece of themselves in someone else's story. I saw Emily chatting with a group of friends in the corner, while Jack helped the organizers bring more drinks to the tables. Familiar faces mingled with people I had never met, all blending into an atmosphere that felt warmly whole. A female reporter approached, microphone in hand, and asked, Isla, why did you choose the theme Women Who Walk Away? I looked around, my eyes landing on a photograph hanging near the window. A woman walking away down a cobblestone street, her shadow stretching long in the afternoon sun. Because sometimes walking away isn't running, it's finding your way home. And I knew somewhere someone would hear and understand that they weren't alone. The exhibition went on with laughter, clinking glasses, and whispered stories. Inside me, a calmness spread, like standing on the main shoreline in the morning, the cold wind threading through my hair while the sun still rose. I didn't look at the envelope again. It lay quietly in my bag and I knew that one day I'd throw it away without a second thought. But today it was only a small detail in a much bigger picture. A picture of people who had the courage to step out of the shadows and of me who had learned to let go in order to hold on to myself again. Each photograph in that exhibition wasn't only its own story. It was a mirror for countless others who had once faced the choice of staying or leaving. I believed everyone has that moment in life, when you have to put yourself on the scale and decide what the true weight of happiness really is. And you, what about you? If one day you realized that the hand once holding yours was the very one pushing you farthest away, would you choose to forgive? Or to walk away to find yourself again? I truly want to hear your thoughts, because maybe your answer will give strength to someone standing at life's crossroads right now. If you resonated with today's story, leave a comment, hit like, and subscribe so you won't miss the next stories about the journeys, the hidden corners, and the warm moments in family life. Every share you give will help these stories find the people who need them most.